Welcome to EWA's FIN-LYT podcast. EWA is a fee-only RIA based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We hope all listeners of this podcast will benefit as we deep dive into complex financial topics that we will make simplified for you. And we hope that this really serves as a catalyst so that you can make the best financial planning decisions for your family and also save time.
Welcome everybody to this week's podcast. I'm joined by Devin, and today we are going to go through a actual case study. Obviously, not going to give any personal information, but just a high-level overview of a recent new client and kind of what they looked like when they showed up, what their assets looked like, what we did with them, and then everything that we implemented.
Yeah, we got it. I think maybe one of the main purposes of doing this is provide people a bit of an insight into what we actually do to help people reach their goals, right? Not only for our firm, but also for the industry as a whole. So I think this would be pretty valuable. Everybody let us know what you think about this episode, and we'd love your feedback and potentially make it as valuable as we can.
Yeah, and I would say we really work with a lot of, I would say, two ends of the spectrum with financial planning. So the first end would be, people that are later in life, let's call it 50s, 60s, they've accumulated assets. What do we do now? And the second end would be high income earners, could be a specialized physician, could be a business owner, doesn't have obviously as many assets yet, but they have a very high earning potential. They've started to save and they're on their way to get there. So that's I think it's a really cool perspective. We can share the perspective of the older clients with the younger people and vice versa. So this specific case study we're going to look at is on the first side of a younger high income earning couple and everything that they're doing. So
yeah, for sure. Okay, let's dive in. So Jamison, just generally high level overview of their situation, maybe money where it's at now, money as it's coming in, et cetera, et cetera.
So one spouse is a specialized surgeon. So he did about did his med school 4 years, did his residency 4 years. I believe his all in was like 10 years. He did his fellowship. So went through 10 years of training, essentially schooling, training, well, plus your undergrad. So you do 4 years undergrad, 4 years med school, it's 8, 4 years of residency, that's 12, probably another 2 is 14 years. So if you think about it, by the time people like this really start making money, they're in their mid-30s. They've deferred a lot of their income gratification. They feel really behind. These were their words. They feel really behind compared to their peers because people that weren't specialized physicians, they started making money in their 20s. So they came to us there at the end of the first contract, the surgeon's at the end of his first contract. And so he's, in line to now start negotiating for another significant pay raise. And so just lay of the land, high income earners, no kids, purchased a house. They've accumulated some assets, overall net worth, about $1 million. Some of that's in the house that they have. And they kind of just had like an array of, and this is very common, we see this all the time, if you're not working with an advisor, kind of just like an array of accounts. So they have current employer accounts, 403B, a TSP, there is a Roth IRA sitting out there, there's an old 401k, and there's a pension plan as well. So that's kind of the lay of the land of the assets. We'll get a little bit more detailed here in a second, but anything to add, Devin?
No, I think you covered it. But you mentioned that they felt that they were a little bit behind it, and I remember them mentioning that in the meeting. What were some of the other pain points that they brought up or that we uncovered during our kind of initial conversations?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just, especially if you're really into your profession, whether you're a physician, a business owner, executive, whatever, you probably don't have a lot of time, free time. You're spending a lot of time working. And these people, they like to travel, so there's traveling in a lot of their free time. And a lot of their concerns, number one, they felt behind even though they're in good shape. But the second thing would be they just didn't know how much or what they should be spending, what they should be saving. It's really just kind of a not knowing what they should or shouldn't be doing, what's the most tax efficient way to save. And it's just really giving a lot of those clarifications that we could sit there and talk about numbers and nerdy tax stuff, investment stuff. But at the end of the day, people just want how much money can I spend? How much do I need to save? How does this actually impact my life? So I'd say those were feeling behind, and then just like what to do and how much to spend and save.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially on that second piece where, again, if I remember correctly, they were, and I think we see this all the time with specialized physicians and physicians in general, of because they had that late start, they don't know where they quote unquote should be.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't believe in a should necessarily, but they didn't have much of an idea of where they kind of stand and maybe if they're set up to reach their kind of longer term goals. So
yeah. And another thing that a lot of physicians struggle with after going through all this training is they're not making a ton of money. You're maybe making 50, 60 grand you're not making anything in med school. You're taking out loans. So you're losing money. And then through your training, especially if you do fellowship, there are going to be 6 or 8 years you're making 50 to 60 grand a year. And they know this big paycheck's coming when they sign their first contract. So a lot of times, and it wasn't the case with them, but I'd say a lot of times they start to overspend. They start to spend money they haven't earned yet. And then when you're around, you're in your training, you're in the hospital around other surgeons, doctors, they're talking about the cars they're driving, the houses they're buying, the vacation house. It's really easy to let lifestyle keep creeping because you're trying to keep up with the people around you. And we're tribal beings by nature, so you obviously want to fit in with everyone around you and feel good about it. So that's another struggle with people in this situation. It didn't really apply to them. They did a pretty good job of keeping lifestyle down. They're not flashy people. They don't really care about a nice car or buying a crazy car or house or anything like that. But I'd say that's a common issue with this situation too.
Yep. Okay, so we mentioned goals a few times, kind of in general, but what were some of their specific goals for both the short and the long term?
Yeah, so no plans to have kids, which is becoming more and more common now. The younger millennial generation is just, they're having less kids, or if they are, it's later in life. So when we come across clients like this, which is getting very common, more common now, a lot of their goals were, number one, they wanted to make sure that they're traveling, enjoying their time off work because they work a lot and work really hard. They want to be on track to not necessarily retire, because what we heard, one of the spouses would retire soon, and the other one said, I probably would never really stop, or I work into my 70s. But financial independence was a big goal, so getting to a point in their mid-50s, and again, they're mid to late 30s, it was mid-50s to be financially independent, where you have enough money, you're saving, you're working because you want to, not because you have to, you're not relying on that hospital to give you a paycheck. So I'd say enjoying life now, traveling, saving for long-term goals. Third thing would be buying, they bought a house a while back, just like a first-time house, nothing crazy. They want to buy their forever home in a suburb here in Pittsburgh. So, we're talking $1.5 million house purchase in the next couple years. And then, again, they don't have kids. There's no education savings or anything, but family is really important to them. So being able to have money available to support their family, one of their families overseas, so support their family overseas, and then just be able to help with whatever the family needs. So I would say those were main goals. Anything you think I missed?
No, you covered it. Okay, so this is over the series of a couple of conversations. We uncover their goals. We kind of do a fact finder meeting to discover their financial situation, etc. And then the third piece is recommendations. So what did we do? What type of analysis did we do to come up with those recommendations? And then what were some of the 3 to 5 recommendations that we did come up with for them? So
the first thing we always show people, which I think is really important, is, hey, let's assume you never work with us and you just keep doing what you're doing. You're saving into a pre-tax TSP. You're saving into a pre-tax 403B. They have a lot of cash. They're not investing a lot of their extra money. What's life look like? I believe they were, I don't remember off the top of my head, I think it was like 60, 65 they were on track for.
Yeah.
So first thing is, here's where you stand. Just to give you an overall balance sheet, a couple $100,000 in cash. Let's see, what's this? $10,000 in a Roth IRA that they just started. And then between that, there's $50,000 in an old retirement plan and existing retirement plans, let's call it 600,000-ish. So outside of the real estate, 600,000 or 700,000 of assets. So they've done a good job saving. Again, live below their means. So first scenario, hey, if you didn't do anything, you kept saving tax inefficiently, I would say. You're not maximizing your tax savings. On track for if you're in your 60s, live the lifestyle you want, be financially independent, and then obviously, build in, here's how you would save for that house. And a lot of the conversation too is just cash flow management, and we're not telling people how to budget or what to spend their money on, but they're making, let's call it $600,000 right now. It comes out to like $30,000 a month. They only spend like 10. So that $20,000 extra, what are we going to do with it? And for them, it was just building up in cash. They weren't really doing anything with it. Mm-hmm. So now we'll get into anything to add there before we get into actual recommendations.
No, I think that covers it. Yeah.
Okay. And then also doing they had some insurance in place, disability life insurance, not, in my opinion, not properly structured. So reviewing that, restructuring that. But then when we get into recommendations, it was mainly around just tax efficiency. So the first thing would be maximizing Roth accounts in your retirement plan. So what that means, TSP, you can do a Roth deferral instead of pre-tax. There's $23,000 going into a Roth TSP. This specific employer the other spouse offered what's called a mega backdoor Roth. So within the 403B, they were doing $23,000 pre-tax, no after-tax contributions. Do the $23,000 Roth. 6% of your savings can then go into the mega backdoor Roth, so we can get the full $69,000 less the employer match. So call it $69,000 minus like 17, $52,000 ish into Roth. So those are the first like low hanging fruit recommendations. Maximize all your Roth accounts. Why we want to do that? Number one, tax-free growth accumulation, tax-free distribution, tax-free pass on to whoever you're going to give the money to when you die. Second thing is Roth accounts don't have retirement minimum distributions. So when you hit 73, you're not forced to take the money out. You don't have to worry about sequence of return risk, selling money when the market's down. And you have more autonomy and control over when you take it out for that reason. You're not forced to. And I would say the biggest thing with, even if we get the question, well, I'm going to be in a lower tax bracket when I retire, you very well may be, but we don't know what taxes are going to be. So taxes now are historically low. Our opinions are probably going to go up. They're probably going to go up as soon as next year, depending on who gets elected in this election. The tax code's set to expire after 2025. Probably, regardless, going to be a tax overhaul. And one of the things that's been on the chopping block with these tax reforms has been taking away Roth funding for high-income earners. So one of the things is you may not be able to fund Roth in the future. Let's maximize it now. And if that tax code changes, we've gotten as much into Roth as we possibly could. So outside of the retirement plans, we're maxing out the old 401k, which is called $50,000. We're going to convert that to Roth immediately. Why? Number one, new contract's going to kick in next year. They're automatically going to be pressed into the 37% tax bracket, and taxes could go up in the future. So let's pay the taxes with some of that cash built up on that old 401k. It's 50,000 times, what's the math there? Probably 20,000-ish in taxes to get that money into Roth. And then once that's done, maxing out backdoor Roth IRAs for each of them. So $7,000 a year each, backdoor Roth. So with all of that, we have 14,000. Let's do some quick math. 23,000. What did I say? 52. 14 plus 23 plus 52. What's that come out to be?
89.
Quick math. 96. All right, no. Yeah, you're right. 89. 89,000 a year is funded into Roth, and that's without really any additional savings. They're doing that after tax in the backdoor Roth, but that's just essentially taking close to what they're saving now and just make it more tax efficient. So that's the first discussion point, is just tax efficiency. And outside of that, they could do an HSA, can they're $8,300 in something that's tax deductible and then growing tax free. But anything to add on those?
No, I think you covered it from a contribution standpoint. Could you speak fairly quickly, because I know we can get into the weeds in this very, very quickly, but the asset allocation strategy, what is our overall philosophy and what we put these folks into? Yeah,
let's hit that in a second.
Okay.
We'll come back to that. Let's just round out the recommendations. So outside of that, so again, let's say they have $30K a month coming in, they're spending $10. Once we do all this Roth stuff, let's say it drops income down to $28 a month. We have $18,000 a month left over. What are we going to do with that? First thing would be, let's maintain a comfortable amount in savings, which I think we agreed on, like $50,000. And then outside of that, there's no real reason to just build up cash. So we're going to take some of that money, we're going to set aside for a down payment on a house that they want. They don't have a mortgage on their current house, so what we probably will recommend too, open a home equity line of credit. Let's say a $500,000 house, 80% of that, get about $400,000 available in a home equity line of credit. Now in the next year, if you go to buy that new house, you can draw on that line of credit, use it as a down payment without having a contingent offer on your house sale. House sells, pay that off, net the $100,000 out, and do whatever you want with it. But that $18,000, let's say, $3,000 a month goes into an account for a house, $15,000 a month goes into a joint investment account, and that's going to be there. Once we've maximized all these tax efficient accounts, there's not a lot of places left to save. Put it into a joint account, direct indexed, and I think now is a good time we can talk about asset allocation. Anything to add on those general recommendations?
I think you covered it.
Yeah, as far as asset allocation, so one of their big discussion points, they had a lot of and they were self-managing, and this isn't incorrect because they could be right, but we never want to speculate. They said, our opinion is the market's just gone up the last couple of years. Everything could be overvalued. What if there's a drop with this election in the next year? We don't want to put a bunch of cash in. And so it's a lot of coaching and just talking around philosophy around asset allocation, diversification, long-term investing. And so when you start to teach this, you really want the only thing that we want in people that are this young, the only thing we want in something safe, cash, bonds, any alternative like that, would be for your short-term needs. So in their situation, let's say we wanted $200,000 to put into a house. That's going to stay out of the market because we know they're going to need that in the next 3 years. So that could be in treasuries and cash and bonds. But outside of whatever we decide on that number is for the short-term spending, we're going to be we're going to be long-term investors. You have 20, 30 years till you're going to touch any of this money. We're going to be in all equities. And how we want to position that asset location is really key. So what asset location is putting your tax-efficient funds, so the type of investments you're holding in tax-inefficient accounts and tax-inefficient funds in tax-efficient accounts. So to give you an example, let's talk about a real estate investment, for example. We may have, say 3% of the portfolio in a real estate fund. Well, real estate funds generally kick off. There's a lot of turnover. They kick off interest, dividends. They're really tax inefficient. We're not going to hold that real estate fund in a taxable investment account because anything that gets kicked out, they're going to pay ordinary income tax rates on that, 35, 37%. We're going to position the real estate inside of the Roth accounts. So that's the first thing, making sure we're being tax efficient. But to directly answer your question, yeah, diversified, hitting all the asset classes, and investing for the long term. So mainly equity investors, we're okay taking on risk, knowing that we're not going to touch this money for 20, 30 years.
You just mentioned the asset allocation within some of the tax efficient accounts, but what about the brokerage account that we're going to build up for them fairly quickly over the next 12 to 18 months? What do we think we're going to invest in that?
Yeah, this is a great question. So the Roth accounts, retirement accounts, doesn't obviously want to be tax efficient, but that's where we can hold the tax inefficient funds. Within the brokerage account, you're paying capital gains taxes on any gains you realize, interest, dividends, you pay tax on a year-by-year basis. So that's where we talked a lot about our direct indexing. So instead of investing in ETFs, mutual funds that are going to mirror an index, we're going to invest in individual stocks to make up that index. So what that's going to do is allow us to be as tax efficient as we possibly can in this account that's naturally tax inefficient. We can tax loss harvest the individual stocks and have these losses carry forward forever on your tax return and ideally offset future capital gains. So it's a strategy to knowing that high income earners are going to accumulate a lot of their money in a non-qualified taxable account, and we can be as tax efficient as possible.
Regarding direct indexing, it allows us a lot more control as well within that account.
Yep.
And I know that these guys had mentioned some concerns with effectively value-based investing, some companies and some industries that they didn't want to own.
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but direct indexing allows us to do that very efficiently in a very controlled manner.
Yeah, when we've heard this, we generally our investment strategy stays away from political beliefs, social aspects. So we're going to put the investments in things that, put all that aside. What's the best investment to give you a good return based on current market conditions. But we do have clients that bring this up, and they may say, due to religious beliefs or social beliefs, we want to avoid certain investments, and we accommodate to that, obviously. So within direct indexing, we could say, okay, maybe they don't want to invest in, I'm going to totally make this up, but they don't want to invest in any healthcare companies. So we can exclude any healthcare company within that direct index portfolio, never buy a company in healthcare. And that was a totally made up example, but there could be, religion or political reasons to avoid certain types of companies or industries.
Well, we see a lot of situations, maybe not a lot, but more common than the values-based investing situations where they're over-indexed to a specific industry. Maybe they have a seven-figure portfolio, a seven-figure holding in Apple stock, and they don't want any more Apple stock in their other accounts. Or in the case of physicians, they're over-indexed to the healthcare industry, so maybe they don't want to necessarily own and be too correlated in case that industry were to ever experience a downturn or something like that, right?
Yeah. That's a good point. And then so when we put all these recommendations together, on track for 55, financial independent, I believe they were spending like between 15, 20 a month in retirement, maintain current lifestyle. Goals totally on track. And then one of the other big talking points was, which we hear this question a lot, how much can we spend on a house without overspending? So looking at their current income situation, 2 rules of thumb we want to follow. Number 1 would be housing costs under 30% of net take-home pay. So if they're taking home $28 a month, it's 30% of that. 10%'s 20. So keep housing costs, say $7,500 a month. Keep it under that. That'd be mortgage, insurance, anything that goes into that house. And the second thing would be don't borrow more than 2 times your gross income. So in this situation, let's say they're making $600. Don't take out a loan more than 1.2. Their situation, no kids, low expenses. They could afford to hire a more expensive house. Especially with a new contract coming in, they're going to get an income increase. But those would be 2 general rules of thumbs to make sure that's one of the biggest mistakes we see is overspending on a house or a car. And so keeping these parameters in place to not go house poor.
Yep. Excellent. Okay. So we've kind of set the foundation for the next 12 to 18 months roughly, and we're going to continue to meet periodically, get the plan on track. Past that, so 2 to 5 years out, let's say, we've mentioned contract negotiations a few times here, but in addition to that, and let's certainly touch on that, what else are we doing to kind of help make sure that their goals and their financial plan are on track?
Yeah, so it'd mainly be, the next 6 to 12 months, like you said, we're going to get this set up and automated, make sure they're doing everything tax efficiently, and then a lot of just like coaching around making sure that they're following recommendations. So saving what we're recommending, they get the mechanisms in place on a month-to-month basis to manage cash flow and get money into certain accounts. And then we're talking about, like I said before, life, disability insurance, estate planning, all of that stuff as well. Anything specifically that you're thinking about?
You think it's worth touching upon the negotiations, or yeah? Yeah. So in regards to in regards to the negotiations, the contract negotiations, what exactly do we do to help them in that process?
Yeah. So this situation, this is really common. Again, you're used to making 50, 60 grand, and you get thrown a contract at you making 400. You're going to sign it all day, your first contract. You don't know any better. It's a lot of money. But we see this a lot. The second contract comes up, and we start actually analyzing it, and we pull up the data, and this surgeon's in the 90th percentile in his production. So he's doing the job of 2 surgeons, and he's getting compensated at the 40th percentile. So when we look at the numbers, we say, okay, very familiar with the large healthcare plans in Pittsburgh, how they negotiate, what they're willing to negotiate. You've done this hundreds of times. So we say, okay, here's what is fair pay based on market data. You may double your income or almost double your income if they were going to pay you appropriately. They're probably not going to pay you exactly what the data says. So, if we negotiate this properly, probably could get him an extra couple $100,000 a year in salary, just because he's a super productive physician, and he's basically getting comped for a physician that that's half as productive as him. So if you look at it from the hospital standpoint, and kind of what we'll shed light on is, you could do half your job and get paid what you're, at the rate you're getting paid. You make less money, but get paid at the rate you're going to get paid. And the hospital would have to hire another physician to take on the duties that you're not doing, which is more overhead to the hospital. It's worthwhile to them to pay you, almost what they would pay two physicians, because it's less overhead for the hospital. So the financial side of it, and then obviously making sure there's some nuance. Some of this we consult with an attorney for, but some of the nuances in the contract as far as things like locations where you're practicing at, what your non-compete restrictive covenant says, and those sort of things.
Thanks for tuning in to our podcast. Hopefully you found this helpful. Really hope this is as beneficial and impactful to as many people across the nation as possible. So hit the follow button. Make sure to rate the podcast, and please share with any friends or family members that would also find this beneficial. Thank you very much.